When the world heard the heartbreaking news of Ron Winans' sudden passing, the shock spread far beyond gospel music. Fans were stunned, friends were speechless, and the music world stood still. You won't believe how deeply his death shook people across the globe. The Winans family wasn't just any family. They were gospel royalty, the first name that came to mind whenever people spoke of faith and soul. But what most people didn't know was that behind all the beautiful songs and bright smiles, there was a quiet struggle that no headline ever told. Let me tell you, Ron's story wasn't just about fame or faith. It was about a man who carried pain behind his praise, a man whose destiny took an unexpected turn. Ronald Ron Winans was born on June 30th, 1956 in Detroit, Michigan, in a small house filled with love, laughter, and above all, music. His parents, David and Dolores Winans, known to everyone as Pop and Mom, were deeply spiritual and made faith the foundation of everything in their home. The family didn't have much money, but they had something stronger: unity, prayer, and hope. Every morning began with a hymn, and every evening ended in prayer. Their home was their church, and their voices were their blessings. Ron grew up surrounded by sound, his brothers and sisters always singing, clapping, and harmonizing. It was as if music lived in their blood. From a young age, Ron had something special in his voice. It wasn't loud or showy, but it carried warmth, the kind of tone that could touch a person's heart instantly. He learned early that singing wasn't about being seen, it was about being felt. He believed music had a purpose: to lift, to heal, and to bring peace to souls that were hurting. You see, that's what made him different from others. While many sang for applause, Ron sang for purpose. This is where it gets interesting. Even before fame, he already understood that his gift was more than talent. It was a calling. By the time the 1970s rolled in, Ron and his brothers, Marvin, Carvin, and Michael, started singing together. Their voices blended so perfectly that people in church would stop whatever they were doing just to listen. And it wasn't long before they decided to form a group, the Winans. You won't believe how fast they rose in the gospel scene. Their mix of traditional gospel and modern soul changed everything. People called it a new sound, one that felt heavenly but fresh. In 1981, their debut album, Introducing the Winans, came out, and it was a turning point. Songs like The Question Is and Tomorrow weren't just hits, they became anthems of faith and endurance. Every time Ron sang, it felt like his voice carried something divine. But here's the shocking part. Even as success found them, fame came with a hidden cost. The travel, the pressure, the long nights away from family. It all began to take a toll. The world saw shining smiles and smooth harmonies, but no one saw the exhaustion, the quiet tears, or the silent prayers said backstage. Ron always stayed calm, though. He was the one who prayed before every show, reminding his brothers, it's not about us, it's about him. Still, even the strongest hearts get tired. What makes this story different is that while Ron was lifting millions through his songs, his own heart was beginning to weaken. Literally. But at that time, no one noticed. To the fans, Ron was the rock, always steady, always smiling. But behind closed doors, his health was slowly fading. The constant touring, sleepless nights, and emotional strain were affecting him more than he let anyone see. And when small signs started to show, shortness of breath, fatigue, and dizziness, Ron brushed them off, saying, "God's got me." He believed it deeply, but sometimes faith doesn't erase the body's pain. This is where destiny took an unexpected turn. In the early 1990s, whispers began spreading. People noticed Ron missing from a few performances and interviews. Still, the family stayed silent, keeping everything private. They didn't want pity, they wanted prayer. But soon, something happened that would change everything. Ron was hospitalized, and the news spread quietly through the gospel community. Fans prayed, churches gathered, and everyone hoped he'd be okay. Then came the craziest part. After months of uncertainty, it was revealed that Ron had suffered a major heart attack in 1997. The world was shocked. How could someone so full of life and faith suddenly face death so closely? And yet, against all odds, Ron survived. He came back to the stage, weaker but stronger in spirit. His voice had changed. It carried something deeper now, something that only someone who had faced death could express. People who heard him sing after that said they could feel his soul in every note. But even then, his recovery wasn't complete. His body was never the same again, though he never let the world see his pain. He believed his story wasn't ending, just taking a new path. After his recovery from the heart attack, everyone thought Ron Winans was out of danger. He returned to performing, smiling, praising, and giving hope to people who were struggling in their own lives. But let me tell you, what people didn't see was the pain behind that gentle smile. He looked strong on stage, but off stage, his body was fighting a quiet war. He knew his health was fragile, yet he refused to stop doing what he loved. You won't believe how determined he was. He said once, "If I stop singing, I stop living." And so, even when his heart was weak, his spirit stayed unbreakable. This is where it gets interesting. Every time Ron went out to perform, his family watched with both pride and fear. They could see the tiredness in his eyes, but they also saw a light that never went out. His brothers often told him to rest, but he would just smile and say, "God has me on a mission." Behind the curtains, though, there were days he could barely catch his breath, moments when his strength would fail, and yet, when the music started, it was as if the pain disappeared. The stage became his healing place, and the crowd became his medicine. As the 2000s began, Ron started working on a special project that was very close to his heart, Ron Winans Family and Friends. This album wasn't just music, it was a gathering of love and faith. He brought together some of the biggest names in gospel, Donnie McClurkin, Kim Burrell, and many others. Not to celebrate himself, but to give thanks to God for keeping him alive. But here's the shocking part. While the album sounded full of life, Ron was quietly struggling to stay alive. Each recording session took a toll on him. He would sing, pray, then rest for hours before returning to the microphone. His body was failing, but his heart refused to give up. The craziest part was how peaceful he seemed despite his suffering. Those who visited him said there was a calmness about him, almost as if he already knew his time was limited. Some even said Ron had started talking more about heaven than about concerts or albums. He told his friends, "Heaven is not something to fear, it's home." Destiny took another unexpected turn when doctors told him that his kidneys had started to fail, a side effect of his earlier heart problems. It was a heavy blow. Dialysis became part of his routine, yet he never let it break his spirit. He often told the nurses, "You can treat my body, but only God can heal my soul." What makes this story different is that even in his weakest condition, Ron never stopped being a source of strength for others. When people came to visit him in the hospital, hoping to lift his spirits, they ended up leaving comforted by him. He would sit in his hospital bed, softly singing hymns, his voice faint but full of peace. The doctors and nurses often said his room felt different, like there was something holy about it. He had turned his pain into worship, and that's something few people can do. But here's where it gets interesting. Even though he was sick, Ron started planning another project. He said he wanted to create music that would live long after he was gone. His family tried to convince him to slow down, to focus on recovery, but he said, "My purpose doesn't stop because my body is weak." You won't believe how strong his faith was in those final years. He truly believed that as long as he had a voice, he had a reason to sing. And yet, behind that faith, his health was fading faster than anyone realized. There were long nights when his breathing became heavy, when the pain grew unbearable, but he never complained. His siblings would gather around his bed, praying and singing softly with him. Even then, Ron would smile and whisper, "Everything's going to be all right." But here is the shocking part. Even though his faith was unshaken, everyone around him could feel that something was changing. His strength was slipping away, little by little. It was like watching a candle flicker in the dark, still shining but slowly burning out. And no one, not even his family, was ready for what was coming next. As the days went by, Ron Winans' condition continued to worsen. His family could see it, but Ron kept smiling, pretending everything was fine. He didn't want pity, he only wanted prayer. You won't believe how strong he stayed, even when his body began to completely give up. Dialysis treatments became longer, hospital visits became more frequent, and the doctors warned that his heart was growing weaker. Still, Ron never let fear take over. He once said, "If I'm breathing, I'm blessed. If I'm blessed, I'll sing." Those words became his strength, and the family clung to them too, hoping that faith alone could carry him through. Let me tell you, there were moments when everyone around him thought he wouldn't make it. But somehow, Ron always pulled through. It was as if he had a deal with God, that he would stay as long as there was one more soul to inspire. This is where it gets interesting. Even from his hospital bed, Ron became a light for others. He would sing softly to visitors, pray with patients, and share words of encouragement with the nurses. Many of them said they had never met someone who could be so peaceful in so much pain. But here's the shocking part. While he was giving hope to others, he was quietly preparing himself for something deeper, something eternal. One of his close friends later said that Ron had started talking about heaven more often than before. He said, "I'm not afraid of death anymore. I've seen too much of God's goodness to be afraid." His words hit differently because they didn't sound like fear. They sounded like peace. The craziest part was that he never stopped believing he had more to do. He would plan future concerts, talk about new songs, and encourage his brothers to keep the music alive, even if he couldn't be there. He kept saying the message must go on. That sentence became his final mission. Destiny took an unexpected turn in early 2005. Ron's condition grew critical, and doctors said he needed to stay under observation constantly. He grew weaker by the week, but his faith never wavered. Every night, the family gathered around his hospital bed, holding hands, praying, and singing softly. Sometimes Ron would hum along, even when he was too tired to speak. One night, he looked at his family and said, "Don't cry when I'm gone. Just keep singing. That's how I'll live." On those words, left everyone in tears because deep down, they knew what was coming, even if they didn't want to accept it. And this is where it gets interesting. A few weeks before he passed, something strange happened. Ron had one of his best days in months. He felt energetic, laughed with everyone, and even sang a small song with his siblings. The family thought maybe, just maybe, a miracle was happening. For that one day, it felt like the old Ron was back, full of life, full of joy. But here's the shocking part. That night, he told one of his brothers, "If I don't wake up tomorrow, just know I'm finally home." It was as if he knew that his time had come. The next few days were quiet. Ron grew more tired, and even speaking became difficult. Yet, when someone would mention God or play a gospel song, he would lift his eyes and smile faintly. His faith never left him. It was stronger than the pain, stronger than the sickness. What makes this story different is that Ron didn't see death as an end. He saw it as a doorway, a return home. And while his body was failing, his soul was rising. On June 17, 2005, the world changed forever. Ron Winans took his final breath. The hospital room went silent, but his family said it felt peaceful, like he had simply fallen asleep. He was just days away from his 49th birthday. When the news broke, it hit everyone like a storm. Fans, choirs, pastors, and fellow artists all went silent. People cried in churches, in homes, and in cars as gospel radio stations played his songs in tribute. The man whose voice had healed others was gone, but his message was still alive. The day Ron Winans passed, it felt like the entire gospel world paused. News of his death spread like wildfire. and people everywhere struggled to believe it. You won't believe how many lives he had touched. From church choirs in small towns to fans across oceans, everyone felt the loss. It wasn't just that a singer was gone, it was that a spirit, a comforter, had left the earth. Churches began holding candlelight services, radio stations played his songs nonstop, and social media flooded with messages of love and heartbreak. Even those who had never met him said they felt as if they had lost a friend. Let me tell you, the Winans family stood strong, even in their grief. They chose not to focus on his suffering, but on his legacy. His brother Marvin spoke at the memorial, saying, "Ron didn't just sing about faith, he lived it." That statement touched everyone's heart because it was true. Ron had lived every lyric he ever sang. This is where it gets interesting. At his funeral, when choirs began to sing his favorite hymns, people said it didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a celebration, as if heaven itself was welcoming him home. Even through tears, there was peace. But here's the shocking part. After Ron's death, stories began to surface about the people he had helped quietly, without ever seeking attention. Fans shared letters about how his music pulled them out of depression, how his kindness restored their faith, and how his smile made them feel seen. Nurses from the hospital said he used to pray for them instead of asking for prayers for himself. That's the kind of person he was. What makes this story different is that his legacy wasn't built on fame. It was built on faith and humility. The craziest part is that even in death, Ron's influence only grew stronger. His brothers and sisters continued singing, carrying the torch he left behind. Gospel artists across the world began dedicating songs to him, and new generations discovered his music, inspired by his message of hope and endurance. It was like his voice never truly went silent. It simply echoed in new hearts. Destiny took an unexpected turn again. The man who once feared he might be forgotten became immortal through the very faith he had sung about all his life. Years later, people still speak of Ron Winans as a symbol of quiet strength, a man who turned pain into purpose and suffering into song. Every note he sang carried a story, and every story carried light. You won't believe how many lives he continues to touch through the recordings he left behind. His songs play in hospitals, at weddings, in churches, and at funerals, reminding everyone that even in loss, there is hope. Let me tell you, Ron's journey wasn't about tragedy. It was about transformation. He proved that faith doesn't always remove pain, but it gives it meaning. His story teaches us that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who fight their battles silently. And though his voice may no longer fill the stage, it still fills hearts. This is where it gets interesting. After everything, Ron's passing became more than a moment in history. It became a message that no matter how dark life gets, faith can still shine through. The Winans family continues to honor his memory by singing the same songs that once united them as children in that small Detroit home filled with prayer and love. Ron's story didn't end with death. It lived on in every melody, in every heart he ever touched. And the craziest part, his music still brings the same comfort today that it did decades ago. Every time someone plays his songs, it's as if Ron himself is still there, smiling, singing, and reminding us all that pain can become praise, that faith never dies, and that heaven is only a song away.